Greetings. This is the companion video to my documentation I wrote up on my website, shoddy.com, on how to manufacture RPMs, the build process there. I'm going to presume that you could pull that up as a companion to this, and going to assume a few things. That you're able to install all of the necessary files yourself, because we'll be going over specifically what is necessary to get a spec file made up correctly, and how to use, the basics, basically. So what we're going to need to do is there's a couple packages and groups that you need. The development-tools group, Fedora-packager package, and the package RPM dev tools, as listed on my first step on that guide. Once you get that going, that'll get you to where you can start making the packages. This is not going to automatically, magically figure out what your dependencies are for actually making said package, but will allow you to actually manufacture it in the first place. A few things that I'm going to quickly go over that are on the guide that I just want to briefly comment on. Custom users. As you will see, I'm using my own personal account. The instant that I run into issues, I do use the Make RPM guy. And I do have another account that's used for signing some other people's packages that I make that are completely private. Whenever I get around to actually getting everything in order to sign my own packages for my server, I will be using a specific user account for that. I also do recommend that if you're going to be building both Fedora and EL packages, use two separate accounts. Just forewarning, it's going to save you a lot of hassle, and it's probably not going to be worth your time to trudge through it without it if you're doing any volume. I generally will build them on this account simply because it's just once here, once there. A lot of the packages I'm building are cleanups where a rebuild is impossible from taking a Fedora or RPM Fusion package and just rebuilding it using EPEL or just the CentOS core as a base. When that fails, then I got to go and start from scratch, and generally that's what I have to do. Every now and then it's going to be something that does not exist, but that's rare, which is why I'm saying one thing and doing another. That's the reasoning behind it. All right, now, once you get that done, your first thing you're going to need to do is run the command rpm dev setup tree. That will build, which I'm looking at right here, your home directory /rpm build, and go and make all of these directories for you. Real quickly, build and build root are for the actual compilation process. Your completed RPMs you manufacture will be dumped into here for phase 1. We'll get into that later because we're actually going to be using mock to build it. It's going to put them somewhere else. Your source code is going to be dumped here. The spec files that delineate how everything is done is going to go there, and your actual source RPMs go in here. So we're going to take a rather interesting package that I've recently had to build and go over that just because it has a few interesting little tidbits there that will make things interesting to discuss. We're going to be going over TuxBoot. TuxBoot, I had to make a desktop file. Just keep that in mind because we're going to be using that as part of our spec. And we've got our source code. Those both need to be, since we're going to need them, they're going to need to be in your sources folder. So that's going to get into step 1. For the actual building of our spec, the files need to be in the right places. Everything that's source code related or source-ish code goes into sources folder. That means your tarballs, like you saw there, maybe briefly, maybe caught a glimpse of it. Patches, in this case, by repo, just a file. Another, just a file. Yeah, that all goes in here. Just toss it in there. Don't need to be organized. This stuff here, you can tell what I'm currently working on. And getting hammered out. If you want to blow out the directory and kind of do a side-by-side, that's perfectly fine. When this gets extracted, it's not going to be extracted here. So you got two extractions that can be done. One that you're working on, one that RPM's dealing with. So let's get on to it. Got your source code for something. You want to make a RPM out of it. Well, there you go. First part, dump it in your sources folder. Next, you're going to want to go and open up a terminal and go into your specs folder. So we're going to go cd rpmbuild specs. And we're going to do whatever you're working on. What you're going to want to do is rpm dev new spec. And then whatever the name of the package you're working on. So we're just going to go demo here. And as you can see, we've got a new file here, demo.spec. We open that up, you'll see it's a pretty basic thing. And, you know, one of the things I stressed on my textual documentation is do that so you don't forget something. And really, that's what it boils down to. There might be a few things you need to add or remove that are unique to the situation at hand, but this is going to be the bulk of what you need. And just real quickly to go over this so you understand what we're going to be going into when we go over TuxBoot. The name of the package. Well, in this case we're calling it demo, but you pull up TuxBoot. There we go. TuxBoot. What version are we dealing with? Which iterative release are we doing? And now I want to go over that specifically. The release. If you screw something up, you publish it to your repo. Don't delete it off the repo, and don't just re-upload something that's fixed with the same file name. Iterate the release. Most people aren't going to find out you screwed up, but those that did find out, they're going to need to fix it and get it fixed correctly. So if you screwed something up, change this to a 2. Find something else that's borked, 3, 4, so on and so forth. That's how you want to handle that. That's important because I've run into people that go, oops, screwed something up. Well, you already grabbed the package or grabbed it automatically from a Yum update, and it's broke. They go re-upload the same file name with the fixes, but you don't get it because your Yum or DNF says, well, I already got it. So it thinks. Don't fall into that trap, please. Please, please, please. Make everyone's life a lot easier, and remember that. Next, we got the summary. Just a short description of what's going on. What does the program do? You know, in the case of TuxBoot, there you go. Pretty straightforward. Graphical utility for installing ISO images to USB disks and hard disks. Got the gist. Doesn't have to be a very detailed thing. We don't care about what programming language is programmed in. Doesn't matter if it's necessarily cross-platform unless it's something that's a selling point for it. Just basically, what is it? License. Well, this can get a little interesting depending on where you're getting your stuff from. In your source, it should tell you where your rights are. If it's GPL, there should be a where is it? There should be a copying file. Maybe it's in README here. Yep, GPL. So, that's going to be one of those things where you need to look it up, figure out what's going on, and go from there. In fact, while we're at it, we're going to need that for later. And that should be good. All right. So that's where you're going to find that. You can't find it in the source somewhere. There's a problem, most likely, with the developers being jerks and stupid. Yes, I'm going to be blunt about it. They should be defining what license their code is under pretty explicitly. Should be there right there in the source. If not, check the website or flip off an email asking them why it's not defined and what it is so you can package it appropriately. The URL. Where did you find the software? What's their URL? You don't have to give it the specific path to the source file, since we want to keep things a little bit generic. But where'd you go? Well, here, tuxboot.org. The source. This is one of those fun lines that so many people have botched numerous times until they go, oh, that's what's going on. Here we got two different macros in action, name and version. And it's going to pull name, version. And look what that kind of looks like. That file there, yes, we're pointing to the actual tarball. And you can use macros to your heart's content to find just about anything in here. So if you want to reference the name, there you go, version, here you go. In our case here, for the description here, we've got a source 1, the desktop file. They didn't make one, I made one for them. Here we go. Now the next area we've got, they only make one of each, build requires and requires, but you're probably going to have a good pile of them. And in the case here, yeah, we've got a good pile of them. And what build requires delineates is what it takes to actually compile the software. Requires is what does it take to run the software. Generally speaking, you're going to be able to find this out in your README files. And yes, lo and behold, here we go. For running it, they gave it to us. Pretty much flat out told us what we need. For building it, they told us what we needed to do. And we could plop that in for tuxboot. Now, they told us what they want. Here, let me pull that back up. libqt4dev. That's probably not the same package name, if memory serves right. No, it's actually KD Runtime Libs has it. How did I know that? Well, we're going to go like this. And do a search and see what we could figure out. We're doing a few things just kind of give you ideas in case you don't know. I'm trying to remember now. Got all so cute and messed up. Oh God, brain fart. Just got a text message. Lost it. The yum and DNF commands you can use to locate what you got there. So for example, just to get this moving along, because I don't feel like taking all day. Yum. We'll go G++. GCC, C++, and actually, this is the command that I needed to find. Qt-devel. There we go. Brain farting hopefully ended. So that's what we need to start plugging in here. Certain things you can kind of opt out of. This actually has a prerequisite of the GCC C++. You could kind of get away with that if you know what you're doing. If you don't know for certain, just throw it in there. It's not going to hurt. So you could actually have something like requires that in there just in case. It's not going to hurt. In fact, it's probably not a bad idea to explicitly do it if you're learning so you can see exactly what's going on and start seeing commonality and start to burn into the brain what's going on. Or if you're going to be sharing this with other people that are in the new to packaging department. So, just to recap here, so we had a couple diversions. When you generate the stub using the templates, fill out this as appropriate, and then you're going to have a little bit of legwork to do for your build requires or requires. Hopefully not too much. If it's too much, there's probably something funky going on with the code, and you probably should have been already aware of that. Then you have your description. Again, a little bit more detailed view of what's going on. And then we've got the macros galore for getting everything going. We got prep, setup, build, configure. We got a command here plopped in there for us for making, install. We're cleaning stuff up here, make, install. And then we have some files and doc declarations and our changelog declaration. We're going to go over to Tux Boots. It's just going to be a little bit more meat and potatoes there for us to go and work over. And right off the bat, this is where I started having problems here, which is why I wanted to bring it up. When you run the rpmbuild command on your spec file, the first thing that's getting going, basically, is it's going to check to see if your sources are all accurate and all of that, and then start building up your build environment. If you can't get to your build macro, you're having problems in your prep and setup phase. Generally not prep directly. Usually it's the way setup is invoked. And in the case here, setup-q was a bad way to handle it. You wanted to do just setup. I wanted to bring that up because I'm going to show you here. rpmbuild BA. When you actually invoke the build command, since I could scroll up, it's going to start throwing out information your way. And it's going to tell you where you're at. Now, if it were to barf out prior to the build, it would never say executing the build macro. All right? That's one way to start defining where your problems lie and start troubleshooting down what did you gaff. If you're getting into the build phase and it's barfing out, it's something wrong with your build structure. As you can see here, mine was very non-standard, and it's pretty straightforward if you got something that's simple /configure make install. Obviously, not all applications can be compiled that way. Everyone's got their own little thing. There you go. And the fun ensues. Thankfully, though, they tell you what you got to do. So when we want to build it, tells us what we got to do. Now, on Fedora and Red Hat and any derivative thereof, I want to point out something that a lot of people miss. They say qmake. I say qmake-qt4, as does the Qt4 developer, or I should say packager. If you're doing Qt4 stuff, you need to do qmake-qt4. Simple as that. So there's some stuff that you're going to botch because you don't know the secret code word. Google helps. That's how I figured that out and went, oh, yeah, that's right. It's been too long. But it's the thought process you need to start thinking of. Where did we get? Where did it barf? And what does the documentation tell us? A lot of this, aside from some of this garbage down here with the installation procedure, which I'll get into in a bit, was literally just copy and pasted right out of the instructions. I got pretty much with the broken setup command to here. All of that took maybe 5 minutes. So it doesn't take long. Took me another 15 minutes or so to kind of figure out what was broken, and it was essentially that, the dash Q. If the dash Q don't work, pull it off, see if that fixes it. Or look up, I got in my website side the documentation, which I'll of course put a link to in the video. Well, the RPM link, the book that's listed there, as every little parameter you could ever think of and then some, and you're going to question your sanity because you didn't think there could be that many ways to do just setting up something. It's all there. If you get something that's broken and you kind of narrow it down to, well, stuff's changing dramatically when I comment something out, read what it says. It will make life so much simpler. Now, in the build section, this is where we're actually going to start doing the compilation. This here was setting us up so that we could do some compilation in a protected environment. This is where it's actually going to get down to the meat and potatoes. And as the documentation tells us, what do we need to do? Well, here we got to generate some stuff and run qmake on it before we can make. That's the compilation side of things. The installation part, if you've got anything that doesn't have a traditional make install, you're going to have to do some stuff by hand. Now, there's a macro that says make install. Don't confuse that with actually invoking the command make install. This sets up the environment to do so. Does not actually do that. If you actually need to do that, run, put in here, right down here, make install. That is what you need if you actually need to do a make install, not what I got here. Here, I'm manually making the directories and manually copying and plopping them where they need to go. All right, actually all of that's the copying, making of directories, and you'll find that some of these applications just really don't have a very good installation script, so you kind of figure out what's going on and go with it from there. This one was pretty simple, didn't take me long. I think I maybe spent maybe a half hour total on working on this package, including some of the botched RPMs just due to typos. But that's what you got to do here for the installation side. Files, if you know where the files are coming from, you got to declare them. If you don't know, run the rpmbuild command. It will complain and tell you, hey, we don't have that. Why? Why do you got files here that aren't getting copied out and declared? So you can just copy and paste the error warnings there, and here you go. And as you can see, wildcards work. Now, also, this is what's going to be affecting the system when you actually do a real install of the RPM. We're going to be putting a file, user bin tuxboot. We're going to be putting a bunch of files in user share tuxboot, namely all of these graphics, and we've got this here needs to be dealt with, which is going to be, well, that's actually, yeah, more of this, all your internationalization stuff. And then we got, finally, the desktop file. That's not going to be listed anywhere except for up here because we brought that in externally, so the other source ain't going to see it. One thing that I did gloss over that I could briefly bring up in a bit here is patches. Let's see, I think OpenMortal had some patches. Yeah. OpenMortal required a patch, so you couldn't even build it on Linux without this patch. A macro for handling that, and you're good to go. So, one example of a patch, one of the easier ones, nothing too fancy. And then the final section is going to be your changelog. Just a quick way of kind of detailing what you did. It's the first release, so really nothing more than I packaged it. But if I got bugs I'm fixing, gotta add that in. If you had .8-2 release, well, what caused the -2? What was broke? Who fixed what? And it's let you know when, who, what went down at any given release. So, once again, your spec file slapped together, as you kind of saw me quickly do earlier. Invoke rpmbuild -ba and then the full path to your spec file. If everything works out correctly, you will have where is it? Right here. 3 files that it generates if you are doing things standard. The actual source, the binary, and debug binary packages. All we right now give a hoot about is the source. Because what we're going to turn around and do is feed this, since it had no errors, into mock. And again, here I'm going to detail the parameters real quickly. As soon as I oops, that source is srpms. Tux boot. All right, so what we're doing here is we're invoking mock. If it doesn't work for you as your normal user, just add yourself to the groups. As you can see, we've got a few here that you're going to probably want to be in mock and make RPM. I think I did that for getting access to that user, but yeah, you want to be in mock. But anyway, mock -r in the profile. Now, I made a new profile for building anything that's going out to my repo. Simply because it started getting complicated. I'm pulling in for a couple different sources, and if you use the regular EPEL one, it's only pulling stuff from EPEL and the main CentOS tree. That was not going to be sufficient because I needed some stuff from this guy and that guy. And as I clean stuff up, I'm down to now just, in order to use my repo, you need EPEL and Nux. I'm down to that. Still working on getting Nux out of the picture. It's just that there's a lot of packages I'm using from him, and having to rebuild them is not going to be pleasant. And since most people that are using my repo are on Nux, it hasn't been that big of a deal. But this is how you invoke it. Mock -r, profile, full path to your source RPM. Enter. It's going to take a few moments. This was actually pretty quick, not much to it. But what it's going to do is generate a fake build environment. What this is going to test out is, did you put all of the necessary information for compiling that package in? This would have told me, if, as earlier I kind of commented on, did I forget the GCC-C++ package? I got it installed, but didn't declare it. Well, this tells you. And that's how you can kind of tell if you even need to include it. Mock will complain. Mock will complain about a lot of things. You should listen to those things, because they're usually quite helpful. There's a few other things you can do that I'm not going to get into, but you got RPM lint that'll go through and check to see if you got stuff declared that you're not putting to use, macros you define but never used, stuff like that. But this is the meat and potatoes. This is where most people get stuck at. So, as you can see, it just finished up. And where are we getting? Okay. So we got our results here. And then we're going to go take a look there, which I have right here. And as you can see, we've got 3 files dumped out, and this is where we actually care about the results. If you're going to be dumping this anywhere, that's where you're going to be copying from. For example, I will actually copy this to my repo from here. Not the ones that we made earlier under rpmbuild, but the mock stuff. That's what you want. Absolutely want to do. You do not want to use the rpmbuild stuff because those were not vetted. This was vetted. Now, you can keep these stuff laying around in your RPMs folder, because the last one that you built should be the one that Mock got, so you should be good. So, as long as you made a mock package, you should be all kosher. But this is where you would start to test it. So, just to generate good habits, install the package manually. Double click on it or use yum local install, DNF local install, whatever, to install your mock package. Test it, see if it works. In my case, I already got these installed, but where was it? The other, we got open mortal there. It's in one of these. Tuxboot. There we are. So it installs. Can you run it? Yes, we can. And just do basic checks here. One of the things I noticed when I checked it was, we built 0.8. If you notice there, 0.7 was listed in the header bar. I'm not a programmer good enough with Qt or anything like that to figure that out. That's been a bug on their list for a little bit now. And whenever they get around to it, they'll get around to it. And when they get around to it, I'll get around to packaging it and have that pushed out. Till then, not the biggest of deals, but something you could see. Do things work the way they're supposed to? Just because you built the package that installs and goes through mock doesn't mean it's a quality package. The likelihood is there, but not a guarantee. So there we go. I did promise to go over a few other things. Saw that how a patch works. Just wanted to go over something that's a little bit more simple. Still has a few things that are custom, but as you can see, we're using setup queue. Here we got a CMake that's thrown in there. Remember the make install part? Here we go. That's one of the things we need. And then this is actually the package I found out that it complains about missing files. I never ran into that before because I was rather meticulous, but I couldn't find a good list of what was what. Well, it gave it to me in the complaints during the RPM build phase. So there's just a few samples. Again, if you need to look at any of these spec files and want to go through them or use them as a template, just go to my website, pull up the repo view for whatever appropriate repo you need, whether you're one of those super secret users that still knows about the Fedora 20 stuff that I'm just leaving there, you're on F22 or EL, feel free to grab the SRPMs, extract those specs. That's pretty much what they're there for. Any questions, any concerns, any suggestions, any complaints, feel free to comment on the post, if that's where you got it from, or on YouTube, if that's where you're watching this at. All right, well, thanks. I appreciate it, and good luck, and happy hacking.